This video was originally going to be titled Becoming the #1 Roblox Olympian, and if that's what you would have preferred to see, because I probably would have, don't worry, that's still in here, I gave it a fair shot. But I felt it was necessary to add this extra layer over the video, because what happened, man? Roblox Corporation might not exactly have a spotless record with their events. Most events have actually not been that great. Truth be told, they've only made a few of these unforgettable events, with others being tolerable or just outright bad. So perhaps the first two of these new events were destined to be pretty hit or miss. But somehow they've outdone themselves once again, with the third time's the charm being the worst one yet. Honestly, these events are starting to feel like a social experiment. People got mad at us for not putting any classic games in the classic, so we're going to stick to the theme really hard this time and see if they still get mad. And it's just kind of, I don't know, I feel like nobody actually wanted an event primarily based around sports games. Matter of fact, they're some of the most annoying games on Roblox because most of them have a large amount of keybinds that you need to learn. And besides that, the obvious quests to do in these sports games involve multiplayer, oftentimes mandatory to even attempt the quest. Like, for example, here's one of the games in the event, Boxing League. And the quest in this game is made extremely painful by the fact that pretty much all the quests have mandatory multiplayer requirements. I legitimately had to log on 2 alts to fill up the queue in this 5-player boxing match because I didn't stand a chance against all these people who actually know how to play the game. And I feel like 1, this is by design, and 2, it's probably the most infuriating type of quest you could do. Here's another example. For some reason, to begin this race in Fishing Simulator, you need another person there who is at the same part of the quest as you. Absolutely no reason to do this. They could have just added a way to start the race yourself, but instead you have to plead for people who already completed the quest to come back and help you. But foregoing the poor quest design, since Roblox doesn't really control that, they just have QA testers and maybe sometimes a quest gets changed from their suggestions. Perhaps the most glaring critique of this event is just the format. They basically took the classic and combined it with the hunt and ended up having 50 games with 8 badges each. Now obviously you don't have to complete this event 100%, in fact the prizes are gotten pretty early on when you've only completed a few games. However, they do incentivize you to play as many games as you can, because all the badges you get contribute to the score of your team. With the teams you can pick being Angry Canary, Pink Warriors, Crimson Cats, Mighty Ninjas, and you know what? Cut the explanation. Let's just start the first game and I'll explain as we go. My goal was to just place anywhere on the leaderboard. First place, 10th place, 15th place. I wasn't really aiming anywhere. And you may be asking how I was planning to do that. Well, however, there is one small issue. I'm kinda stupid. To place really highly in any of these events, you obviously need endurance and a lack of sleep. However, perhaps just as important is being able to gauge how the quest is designed and finding the optimal way of doing it. And it is incredibly obvious how bad I am at doing that in our very first game, because instead of instantly going for the tasks with the highest point count, I went for the longest one, playing 10 songs. It was fine for this game since this was the soft launch and there weren't any other quests out yet, but you'll see later on that this is a huge flaw I have which definitely hindered how quick I was. The tasks themselves were fine in this game and the shines were... Just cutting in here to say that this event had a very similar format to the classic, with the shines being collectibles you can find and the silvers being the main quests. Although this event had less of each than the classic did to compensate for the large amount of games. Easy to find. Now the next game which soft launched, well, I say soft launched, it didn't. Someone just figured out that you can use admin commands on private servers to give yourself the badges. So, off to a great start. The actual second game to soft launch was Adopt Me, however it only released with the shines and the arena for getting the silvers was closed. And same as the classic, the shines were really hard to find in this game. We eventually found 4 of them, after which I just left for Game 4, Horse Race Simulator. And I think now would be a good time to mention that I spent the 3 days before the event started preparing for it, grinding various games and getting familiar with them. And one of those grindy games was this one, and it definitely paid off as this only took me 8 minutes to complete. You'll notice I'm not really gonna be describing what the quest was in each game, because that would just get a bit boring. So if I don't say what the quest was, you can just assume it was some generic grindy thing. And moving on, game 5 was Keys. I thought this was a Piggy clone, but it's not really. It plays a little bit differently. Unfortunately, this is where the multiplayer exclusive stuff starts, with you having to save 10 of your teammates. But it's fine in this case, cause that's not really a very difficult thing to do, and you don't have to convince other players to do anything. You just kind of passively take the opportunity whenever it arises. And I was doing it with friends as well, so it was even easier, including Eagle.
Who actually ended up placing second in the whole event. Good job, Eagle.
And the next game was Pull a Sword, which is a game that was in the Hunt event, so I didn't bother grinding it. Turns out I grossly underestimated this game, and one of the quests required you to get 500 billion power. This wasn't as devastating for me as it would have been for a regular player, because, as you know, but still, 500 billion. And also, for some reason, one of the shrines was just randomly out here in the ice world when the others were all in the new event area. Weird choice. And in a similar vein, the next game was Arm Wrestle Simulator. This game was also in the Hunt, in which I had a fairly easy quest, which wasn't affected by how much progress you already had on the game, so I wasn't expecting them to do a grindy quest. And I was right, but I did still grind the game, just in case. It was like a mini adventure game within Arm Wrestle Simulator, which had you doing obbies and arm wrestling NPCs. I somehow managed to miss one of the shines along the way, but it was fine, because it was basically just at the start. And the 8th game I played was Beeswarm Simulator. To be honest, I didn't really like this one, but I feel like I would get beat up if I said that, so great quest. You actually needed a little bit of progress in Beeswarm, of which I had none, so I quickly had to upgrade my bag and net. And it was also just really infuriating shooting these golf balls and constantly landing in the lava. This took me way too long. But eventually I got through, and it only took me around 20 minutes, so it was fine. And then I went on to Pacer Test, which was most certainly not 20 minutes long. In fact, it took me almost double that. Luckily though, I had pre-grinded this game a little bit, so I was able to gain speed for the quest a lot faster than normal. And I also used the VIP server, so I just won the Pacer Test every time with no competition. This was a very boring quest overall, and the first one which pretty much just had AFK parts if you were doing it in a private server. And then I tackled Football Fusion 2 because I really just wanted to get the sports games out of the way. Luckily you could also do this one on a private server, so most of the quests were pretty easy. Surprisingly, the hardest one was just complete a match, because American football games take forever. Huge design flaw in my opinion. Americans, you gotta fix this. And speaking of football, the next game was Ultimate Football, which luckily didn't require you to actually play the game. It was basically just 30 minutes of doing this minigame over and over until you had enough points to claim all the silvers. Game 12 was Super League Soccer, which we already knew the quest of before release due to the badge name, so I knew going into it that this was gonna be pretty easy. It did still take me around 25 minutes though, because I kept getting steamrolled by these people in the small server that I joined. If you're watching this, Llama 2014.
And leaving football for now.
The game I played afterwards was Basketball Legends, which I also got into a small server for, and eventually convinced the only other guy in the server to just let me do the quests. After which my friend proceeded to somehow fail the 3-pointer like 50 times in a row, which delayed me a little bit, but it's fine. And I also didn't find any shines throughout the whole process, which I thought was weird, but I just figured maybe it was a bug that they didn't spawn. And then I played a game called Hockey Legends, which was made by the same people. And I'm surprisingly good at this game. The quests were genuinely just really easy. One of them had you go to a park area, which is when I realized that's where the shines were in Basketball Legends. They weren't bugged. But yeah, me and this random guy absolutely destroyed these people in hockey, and I got all the shines. And then I went back to Basketball Legends and got the shines there as well. And then I went back to football with Real Football 24, which is actually a really well made game. But I didn't really have time to appreciate the game because I joined my friend and managed to complete all 3 quests in one match. It almost feels like the speedrun is going pretty well. Oh, but just as I was beginning to believe, 90 minutes of Boxing League. This one is definitely a competitor for my least favorite game of the entire event. One of the tasks was to win 3 duo matches, which, as the name may suggest, means you need to have another person there with you. Now, this is a problem because the queuing actually broke if everyone queued while a round was still going and everyone had to step off the pad, which means people would camp these spots, so when you stepped off, they just took your position. So I loaded up 2 ults into the game to make it a little bit easier on myself and did the duo quest after a bit of fighting with people for spots. However, what took the lion's share of the time was definitely winning 2 5-player brawl matches. Horrible quest idea. I don't know why they even did this. At first I tried going in with 2 ults and fighting with them to kill the opponent, but I still managed to lose because this guy had experience with the game, which I didn't. So my second course of action was getting help from a friend who also had ults loaded up in the game. We tag teamed this one singular dude and he somehow still killed all 4 of the accounts and won. I even offered him 5,000 Robux to let me win and he had the audacity to turn it down. Luckily after that I won both the brawl matches, but imagine doing this without spare device. devices to join your ult into the game. It would be horrible. And if you thought it couldn't get any worse, the shines were somehow also bad in this game, as it was completely RNG whether they spawned when breaking crates. I'm not even doing ratings in this video, but this is a 1 out of 10. I hated it. Luckily, the game after that was Race Clicker, one I had pre-grinded. Not much to say about this one, it's basically just AFKing and occasionally opening eggs. And then came Be NPC or Die, which is a game that I actually like quite a bit, but the quests weren't very likable. One of them involves catching the players hidden around the NPCs, and there are definitely ways of knowing if the person walking around is an NPC or not, but you don't really know these methods until you've played the game for quite a while. So, needless to say, it definitely took me a while to do, an hour to be exact. And one of the other tasks involved winning a round as sheriff, which I got really lucky with, but I can imagine that being a pain in the ass as well. Then I joined Horse Life, which was another game which we already knew the quests of, so I instantly leveled up my horse and completed one of them. But then I went to do Arsenal co-op because my friends are now ready, so I guess we'll come back to this. And Arsenal once again has one of the best quests of the event. I really like how they just put all the shines in the starting area. It takes a lot of weight off your back when doing this pretty difficult mission they've cooked up here. One part I didn't really like about this quest was the boss. It took so long to do and just had way too much HP. But a great quest besides that though. Thank God for Arsenal always putting in so much effort. And after that I played another shooter game which I respect, that being Bad Business. However, unlike Arsenal, this one didn't have a very good quest. I did the whole thing in a VIP server because it was probably gonna be more efficient than if I actually tried killing people. But yeah, you literally just need to get a ton of kills and like 1 out of 5 times a trophy will drop. This ended up taking me a whole hour to do, which was disappointing because Bad Business could have had a cool quest like they did for Ready Player 2. And Game 22 was one in which I was pretty scared to play, Untitled Boxing Game. And for good reason. Similarly to Boxing League, everyone you play against in this game seems to have a lot of experience because, well, they do. However, the quest was actually PvE battles and not player battles, which initially seemed like a good thing. But if it was PvP, you could have at least gotten on an ult and just gotten 3 knockouts. Here you actually had to try. The first guy you fight was pretty easy to beat and I won first try. But the second guy, oh, he was really annoying. Even ignoring how difficult it was to beat him, this one also got emotional damage points because nobody wants to get beaten up by the twerp, I mean come on. Eventually I did beat him and went on to the last guy, which was apparently so difficult that you only had to knock him out once. Which I managed to do on my second attempt, but this guy really just dodges all your punches and it was really hard to land any hits on him. One positive thing I can definitely say about this game is that I like how creatively the shines are hidden. One's in the UI, one is in a secret server you can access through the server list. It's pretty cool stuff. And then I played HCBB, which is a baseball game that is incredibly hard to play. Genuinely, hitting the ball with the bat is nearly impossible unless you use the bunt mode, which barely makes the ball go anywhere. And perhaps the worst part was that you couldn't do this in a private server and had to deal with the noobs throwing the ball back even when you did hit the ball. Also, the shines were randomly spawning and server-sided. Great combo. I genuinely no clue why they did this. Eventually I just logged on with an ult and cut my own ball so that I could actually score points when throwing the ball back. Then I did Shark Bite 2 and I had heard from a friend before doing this quest that it was pretty luck based and boring, and yeah, that definitely checked out. I just joined with 2 ults and prayed that I didn't become a shark while doing the various tasks. The final silver actually required you to do trick shots on these sequel exclusive trick shot areas that spawn around the map. Honestly, I think I prefer the original game. And also, I couldn't find one that shines at all, so I just went on to the next game, which was Slap Battles. Slap Battles added a custom game mode this time around, which involved slapping a ball around. After a while, I got pretty good at this and scored way more goals than required. But once again, I couldn't find one of the shines, or even 2 of the shines this time around. So I just went back to Shark Bite because my friend told me where the final shine was, and then went to Horse Life to do the last quest and find all the shines, which were actually pretty annoying in Horse Life, spawning in set areas but for some reason not being there most of the time. I had to server hop multiple times, but I did eventually find them in all their spots. And then I got word where the 2 Slap Battles shines were, so I went to get those. We're now around 15 hours in if you count the time from the soft launch, and have completed half the games. I went to the lobby to check my leaderboard position and I was 28th, not bad, but the leaderboard only had 20 spots. I expected to catch up by some spots though, due to people going to sleep after such a long time of playing. Theoretically, if I kept my current pace, I would be done in another 15 hours, which at the time I figured I could probably do without
Sleeping.
And so I went on to Michael's Zombies, and I didn't know what to do in this game for a while, because the wooden boards didn't really catch my eye at first. But eventually I found out that you need to press V on your keyboard to use the tennis racket. And it was smooth sailing from there. The quest basically just consists of throwing projectiles with the tennis racket. Although for a game named Michael's Zombies, I was expecting more zombies. I only saw them once. Then I went to Track and Field Infinite, and this game is kind of funny because there's this crazy method for getting speed using a controller. And if you check the device stats above their head, a lot of people in the game will be playing on a controller, but you can just easily beat them with a macro even though it's banned. If you make your macro slow enough, you can just use one and easily win. Anyways, the shines in this game are stupidly hard, and the Metal Detector Game Pass is actually not a Game Pass but a dev product, meaning you have to buy one each time you want to track a shine. I tried searching on YouTube for tutorials but came up with nothing and eventually just purchased the metal detector. For the quests themselves, they're pretty easy, except for this mandatory multiplayer one where you need to get 4 people in a team. But I just got 2 alts on and then another random person joined, so it worked out. And next up was Blade Ball, which has had notoriously bad quests in both the previous events. And this one was no different. The shines kind of just spawned in hyper-specific maps with no indication as to where they are. And as for the actual quests, they were pretty bad as well, with the worst one perhaps being winning around on a new soccer field map. I don't know if you've ever played Blade Ball, but most servers you join will have these turbo sweaty people with like 500 wins that you physically cannot beat. So, needless to say, winning around on a soccer field map took me a while, especially because they don't allow you to do the quests in VIP servers. And the boss was fine, I actually beat it hitless after a few attempts. Also, for some reason one of the shine badges broke for me, so I just prayed that I could get it later on and went on to the next game, which was Tongue Battles. And I don't have much to say about this game other than that these guys were really annoying when I was trying to score goals for the quest. But I guess that's what happens when your integration interferes with people trying to play the game normally. And then I went on to Creatures of Scenario, which for some reason had private servers for 500 Robux. But I had to buy one because one of the quests involved killing people and I was really not trying to level up any more than I needed to. So I killed my ult a few times and it was pretty much done. And then we went to do Dress to Impress with some friends because for absolutely zero reason they shoehorned the mandatory multiplayer into this quest as well, making you pair up with another player and play top 4. But to be honest, I've grown to like having this game in these events because the quests are usually pretty decent. And this one was no different. You can tell they put a lot of effort into this obby and race arena, and they were both pretty easy. But a game which did not have easy obbies was Drive World, which once again felt the need to shoehorn multiplayer into its quest. They had you play top 3 in an obby race with at least 4 people 3 times, which would have been fine if anybody actually played these quests. But I went to the queuing place and there was nobody there. I didn't actually mind the obbies being slightly difficult, but the fact that you need 3 other people to be doing this quest with you is just stupid and definitely brings this game down a peg. And I figured after doing Drive World that I'd get the other car game out of the way, so I did Driving Empire. And there's not much to say about this one. They basically just did the same quest as for the classic, having you do a race over and over until you can claim all the silvers. And then I went to Super Golf, which, although I didn't know it at the time, would be the bane of my existence for the next 2 hours. The silvers were fine. You pretty much just had to join servers playing the new basketball and hockey game modes, which were very easy to find with the server select feature. But the shines? I don't know what kind of demon possessed whoever was hiding these, but god were they difficult to hit. They're all hidden in random areas in random maps, and each time you run out of time or strokes trying to hit one, you just have to find another server which is nearing that hole. Genuinely, the only reason I ever hit this shine on the ice map was because the basketball game mode allows you to jump, otherwise there would have been no way. But hold on, because before any of that happened, I joined Fashion Famous to get all the shine badges, which were awarded when you joined the game for some reason. I didn't want to do this game quite yet though, so instead I went to a game that I actually really enjoy.
Eat the World.
This one pretty much just has you play the game normally, but on the new map they created for the event. The shines utilize the ability to destroy blocks and are hidden behind walls, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, it only took me like 20 minutes to do, so this quest was fine enough. And after that was Epic Minigames, which created 3 arcade games in the lobby that you have to get certain scores in. Now the first 2 games are pretty easy, but the third one was just unnecessarily difficult for some reason. I lost all my footage of doing it, but seriously, I was surprised how difficult this was to do. And the rest of the quests were very easy to do with the Pick Next minigame dev product, although I feel bad for anyone who doesn't have any Robux, because this would get very tedious very quickly. After doing all of that, I decided to go back to Fashion Famous and found out the quest basically just consisted of rejoining and getting the correct outfit theme. It really just boiled down to waiting, there wasn't much to this quest. And after that I played Gym League, which is another game that I grinded prior to the event, so luckily I already had the second gym unlocked and was able to get the shine that was in there. But the bulk of the quests were actually in the summer event, and again, it was basically just a lot of waiting for random things. I'm not gonna go into detail because you don't care. And afterwards I did Survive the Killer, which I was not expecting expecting to give me as much trouble as it did, but oh, it did. For some unknown reason, instead of making the quest as simple as reviving 10 people, they make you revive 10 people with a helper, which basically means there needs to be another person there helping you revive. Luckily for me though, I figured out the killer could also be a helper, so I could just use 2 alts, one of which was the killer and one of which I revived. But the third quest was arguably even worse, having you find these randomly spawning fuses on the subway map and flipping levers with them. This took me like 4 whole attempts to finally do, which all totaled to 100 minutes spent playing this game, which definitely set me back quite a lot. And the game after that was I'll Be Butcher on a Bike, which had me scared for a while, thinking I got soft-locked. I did the second quest like 3 different times trying to fix it, until I eventually joined a private server and found out that the game was lying to me. It kept saying I had completed the quest at stage 34, when in reality I needed to get to stage 40, and this luckily fixed it, meaning I was no longer soft-locked. The rest of the quests were pretty inconsequential. Placing top 3 in a race is really easy, and so is beating the event world. Although I think they should have put all the shines in the event world instead of some of them being in random other worlds, because they were just really awkwardly placed. And the game after that was Launch the Space Simulator, which once again I had already pre-grinded prior to the event, which left collecting watermelons as the longest part, but I was able to do that in around 15 minutes as well. And then came Horrific Housing, which I expected to have a good quest, and yeah, it did. You basically just had to wait for some events to happen and survive them, and they were really common, so this wasn't a bad thing. The shines were also fairly easy to find, with this cool little lobby being added to the lobby for 2 of them. And then a waiting simulator game, Funky Friday. I got slowed down a little bit by not realizing you have to hit the minimum point score for the quests to count, but eventually got told by a friend and then I was just waiting. This would probably be more difficult without an alt, but since I was using one I just won every single match. And then we have Watermelon Go, which is basically just Suika game in Roblox, and it was a pretty short and sweet quest. This game is entirely 2D, so they had to get pretty creative with the shines, and it was nice to see. The quest I thought was going to be the hardest was beating someone in an online duel, but my opponent seemed to be in a bit of a rush, so I did it first try. Now, something you have to know before we go into murderers versus sheriffs duels is that my brain was absolutely fried at this point. I had been playing Roblox for around 30 hours straight and was definitely starting to feel the effects of it. So when I say I was completely out of it when doing this game, I mean it. Honestly, it was just dumb luck giving me really good teammates letting me progress quicker. The final quest involved killing people with only a knife, which in the state I was in was not a very easy task. But I eventually did it and went to a game where I could turn my brain off, which was Sonic Speed Simulator. The quest here was literally just running around the map. There was nothing else to it. I had specifically saved quests like this for the late game because I knew that I wasn't exactly going to be at my smartest at this point. And the same goes for Pet Catchers, which had 3 really easy minigames created for it. You basically couldn't fail any of these if you tried. This was one of the simplest quests in the event. It got a little bit grindy with the painting minigame, but it didn't take me too long, so it was fine. But when I reached Fishing Simulator, I had this really strong urge to just quit. Give up. In my mind, I knew that I had the most difficult game in the event still left to beat, Motor Rush. This was the game that had soft-locked my friend, eventually causing him to fall from first place to not even being on the leaderboard anymore. And I also had that one Blade Ball shard left over from earlier since it had bugged and not given me the badge. And I had to do all the quests in the lobby too. And the Tokyo driving game. It didn't seem too bad, but it was another thing standing in my way. I tried to power through. Hell, I managed to get every silver in Fishing Simulator. But on my way to one of the last 2 shines I needed from this game, I had taken a wrong turn and accidentally gone to the wrong place. And so I went to the lobby to check my rankings. I was 16th on my team leaderboard, but I knew that if I went to sleep I would no longer be on it at all. And so I tried to do the challenges in the lobby. I heard they were pretty easy to do, so I figured they might be a good breather. However, I know it doesn't seem like it, but I actually take pretty good care in getting enough sleep. And I had been awake for 40 hours straight at this point, and I wasn't built for this. The effects of it were definitely starting to be noticeable. And so I gave up. Not on the leaderboard, but on this event, on every event. I've been thinking about it for the whole 30 hours I was playing this event. It just doesn't feel the same anymore. FECON 2019 and 2020 were fun death runs that I speedrun because I genuinely cared. All of these events just felt like a chore. This was the same thing that felt back in 2021 when 100%ing Metaverse champions, but enough time had passed since then that I'd forgotten that and thought perhaps these giant death runs were going to be worthwhile. The truth is, I went to sleep that night, not as a sore loser, but with a feeling of catharsis. I just can't bring myself to care about any of these events anymore. To this day, my completion meter of the game sits at 93%, and it's going to stay that way, because if these events don't change, if they continue to just be corporate slop, then I'm done. And you don't have to feel the same way. Hell, I might still get some of the future event prizes if they look cool. But for me, as someone who's done pretty much every single Roblox event since 2016, I think this is the end of the line.